Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, and today from Cape Breton in the Nova Scotia area, we have with us Morgan Murray, author of Dirty Birds. So Morgan, tell us a little bit about yourself. I understand you're from a place, Caroline, Alberta. Is that correct?
That is, yes. Hello, and thanks for having me. I'm a Cape Breton-based writer these days, but I grew up in a little itty-bitty village, well, on a farm outside a little itty-bitty village in rural central Alberta, Caroline. It's one and only claim to fame. Well, I guess it's got two claims to fame now. Kurt Browning, the figure skater, is from there, and also Kurt Russell, the defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers, is from there. So we all learned how to skate at a young age, but I escaped and now live on the East Coast and write and work and raise a family and enjoying it out here.
And if you tell me that the local hockey team's theme song is Sweet Caroline, I'm just going to hang up right now. So
I wouldn't dare. That song has never been sung or played at any community events or dances or anything. We wouldn't dare.
Oh, good. So, Kurt Browning, was he a neighbor, or did you know him at all, or?
He's about my parents' age, so they went to school with him, and his family farm about 5 miles from my family's farm, so I knew him a little bit, and he knows my family pretty well. And when he was winning all his medals and everything, my mother was the chair of the Kurt Browning committee in town, and so every time he'd win, the town would have a big party in the Kurt Browning arena, and my mom was the head organizer of those. So I don't know if he'd pick up the phone if I called him, but if my mom did, he would talk to her.
That's good. We're talking with Morgan Murray from Cape Breton in Nova Scotia, of course. And how long have you been in the Cape Breton area? Because you're starting to sound like a Nova Scotia person.
Too long, that means. No, me and my wife moved back here about 4 years ago, and for 9 years prior to that, I was living in Newfoundland. So if we were talking 5 years ago, you wouldn't understand a word I was saying, but
that's right.
I'm improving, hopefully. But yeah, I bounced around. I started in Caroline, and after high school, I went to the University of Calgary, and did my undergraduate degree there, and then I lived in Montreal for a little while, which we'll get into, I'm sure, with Dirty Birds. And then I went to graduate school in Newfoundland, and the tourism slogan, the unofficial tourism slogan for Newfoundland is "Come for the scenery, stay for the fog," because it seems like a lot of people go there for a short time and stay for a long time. So I was there for 9 years before I got kidnapped back to rural Cape Breton in my wife's hometown. So here we are. Took a long way here.
Here we are, and we're talking with Morgan Murray, and the book in hand, and actually I have it right in my hand, Dirty Birds, concerning the adventures of a chap named Milton, Ontario, and that's his name, not the place. He's not from there. He's from Belly Button, Saskatchewan. And why did you choose that name?
For Milton?
Yeah, for both the name of Milton and the town.
Sure, yeah. So I wanted Milton to be sort of a bland, pretty normal character, sort of the everyman character that you see in some books. And what better way to express it than name him after a suburb? And I just thought Milton, Ontario had the nicest ring to it for a person's name, better than Etobicoke, Ontario, or anything like that. So that's where Milton started from anyways. And then Belly Button was, it's based on a real town. My grandparents grew up in Riverhurst. I don't know if you've ever had the chance to Riverhurst, but it's not much there. It's about 100 people, I think. And my grandparents grew up there, and they moved to Alberta when my mom was very young. But my great-grandmother, she lived there until she was in her 80s, I suppose. So we'd go visit every summer. So it was the Saskatchewan town I knew the best, little town. And Belly Button just seemed like a somewhat plausible but kind of goofy name for a town in Saskatchewan, and its proximity to Elbow, Eyebrow, and Central Butte and all that kind of, it's in the body part section of Saskatchewan there, right where the Belly Button would be.
Right, it's a Belly Button, like you said, Central Riverhurst. They have a ferry, don't they, there?
Yeah, there's an old cable ferry that goes back and forth across the highway there. So
now your writing style reminds me of Jack Kerouac, because you seem to play the typewriter, I'll call it that, like a jazz piano player. Once you start going, you don't know where you're going to end up. Is that kind of how you approached writing Dirty Birds?
Yeah, I like to say it was about 12 years in the making, and then just a few months in the being made, because I lived in Montreal in 2007, which is when the novel was based, and I used a lot of my own experiences to sort of start Milton off on his misadventures, and a lot of the episodes start like mine did, but they don't ever end like mine did, fortunately for me, unfortunately for Milton, but yeah, it took about 10 years to figure out that I wanted to write a novel and what I wanted to write about and who the characters could be and how the plot would go and all of that. And then I finally eventually sat down to write it, and the writing went pretty fast. And I don't know if it was Kerouac fast, but I have a day job, so I wrote sort of evenings and weekends. And after a couple months, I had 130-some thousand words, and which we'd call a manuscript, and send it off to the editor, and we started hacking away at it to see if there's anything there. But yeah, I've always been fond of sort of the more poetic use of prose and using repetition and rhymes and things within it just to make it kind of fun to read. So some cross between Kerouac and Dr. Seuss, I suppose, are strong influences. I'm trying to write like that just so it's interesting and engaging and fun to read.
It is a fun read, and I'm just going to read a passage here just so everyone, the listener, I'm an old radio guy, you're only supposed to talk to one person at a time. So this is a paragraph from Dirty Birds by Morgan Murray. I was going to say by Milton, Ontario. Here we go, describing some of his adventures in Montreal. He tagged along with Naughty or Georgette or Rudy or Ava to every house party and potluck, every secret music show of bands no one had ever heard of, every pay-what-you-can fringe festival, vaudeville, burlesque, extravaganza, every art student term project exhibition, every free first Tuesday of the month at Musée des Beaux-Arts, every second Wednesday of the month at Musée d'Art Contemporain, every half-off showing of Elephant Man at Cinema du Parc, every poetry reading at every out-of-the-way Saint Henri, Freegan co-op coffee shop, every two-drink minimum open mic bilingual comedy night in dive bars in Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, every work acquaintances bowling birthday party in the far-flung Benluse, I guess that's suburbs, or entire nights spent wandering from 8.5 to 8.5 pre-drinking 4 parties that never happened, and that's all one paragraph.
It's all one breath.
Ooh. So that's, your book, it's hilarious. And I'm only halfway through because I can't stop laughing. Did you intend to be a funny guy? When I try to be funny, I can't, but when I make something up at the drop of a hat or something, it's pretty good. So tell me your process thinking about Milton, Ontario and Dirty Birds, the whole how you put the whole thing together.
Sure, yeah, I wanted it to be funny from the start, and whenever I try to write serious things, they come out no good. But usually, if I try to write funny and kind of have a more satirical tone, and then do a lot of tongue-in-cheek jokes and things like that, and then be more irreverent, it ends up being funnier. So I kind of leaned into that and tried to just fill it with as many jokes as possible. And there's some serious themes in the book, and I won't spoil it for you, but Milton gets in a lot of hijinks and a lot of trouble, and a lot of his best laid plans don't always work out in his favor. So it's not always the happiest of times for Milton, but the humor makes it more engaging, and I hopefully it helps you want to keep reading and going on. So it takes a surprising amount of work to craft the jokes just the way that to write a dirty joke that works in a book, yeah. And to do all that kind of stuff. It's certainly a choice, and I don't think it necessarily comes naturally for me. But I in real life I'm a bit of a smart aleck too, so it helps with the writing too.
Right. So tell me about the artwork. I mean, the artwork is a major part of the book. It's ties in with the storyline. There's little cartoon type figures, I guess, scattered throughout the book. It all makes sense. Tell us about that. I understand there might be some family involvement with that.
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to be married to the lovely and talented Kate Beaton, who's a New York Times best-selling cartoonist and children's book author and all kinds of things. And she's extremely talented, and she did the cover of Dirty Birds, which is a gorgeous cover, and couldn't have asked for a better cover. And so I got extremely lucky. We got the family discount on that, and then I've always been a fan of illustrated novels ever since I was a kid. And when you're a kid growing up, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said it seems like the older you get, the fewer and fewer pictures are in your books, and you're growing up when there's no more pictures. But I always liked pictures, and they always give your mind a break or a different thing to think about while you're chugging along in just blocks and blocks of prose. And with Dirty Birds, I found ways to use pictures to sort of heighten jokes or tell other jokes, add extra humor, to add to the themes of it. If you flip through really quickly and look at just the pictures, hopefully it gives you kind of a overarching idea of what Milton's story is, told through sort of the objects that are important to his life. So the first picture is everything he brought with him to Montreal, which is, not enough T-shirts and a bunch of books and a typewriter and all this. He didn't pack very well. And the second picture is a map of Belly Button, Saskatchewan, which is just a square with a dot in the middle.
Right.
But then as it goes on, there's more elaborate pictures of things in his apartment, or he goes to a anarchist potluck, and it has the chipped secondhand mugs that they're drinking rutabaga soup out of, and the bag of rutabagas they got out of the dumpster in Chinatown, and all of this different stuff. So it kind of tells the story that way too. And then I thought it added an extra element of interest. And then I'm a big fan of Kurt Vonnegut and authors like that, and he puts some illustrations in his book and uses them a little bit differently, but I wanted to try and figure out a way to put some images in there, and luckily the publisher went along with it.
Morgan Murray is with us here on Talking Books, talking about his book Dirty Birds, and the protagonist is a guy named Milton, Ontario, not the town, the person. Why did he decide to leave Belly Button, Saskatchewan and head to Montreal? What's his underlying motivation?
So in Milton's no good at hockey, and he's not interested in working in the oil patch. And so what else? His family doesn't farm, so he's kind of low on options of what to do in Belly Button, Saskatchewan. So he a teacher in high school introduces him to Leonard Cohen, and he falls immediately in love with the songs and poetry of Leonard Cohen, and thinks Leonard Cohen is a genius. And so he gets it in his head that when he grows up, he's going to be a famous poet and a ladies' man like Leonard Cohen. So he graduates from the Polytechnic University of Saskatchewan in Moose Jaw, and saves up his money and moves to Montreal to pursue this fame and fortune as a famous poet and ladies' man, and of course nothing works out the way he quite expects it to. Even though most of his dreams do come true, they're never what he had expected they were, and they're usually a pretty sizable disaster.
And the adventures he got into, such as what we quoted earlier from the book Dirty Birds by Morgan Murray, that kind of stuff actually goes on when you were in Montreal? Or are you exaggerating a tad?
A little bit of both. So I moved to Montreal for pretty much the same reasons and had a little bit better success in that I didn't end up in quite as many disasters, but I didn't become famous wealthy ladies man either. But I used a lot of my own experience as sort of jumping off point. So Montreal at the time, and I'm sure it's pretty similar still, had this kind of strange and very vibrant Anglophone bubble right in the middle of downtown. There's two big English universities, McGill and Concordia down there, and especially in 2007, I don't know if it's changed since, but because of the separatist movement and the referendum and things, a lot of investment and economic development opportunities and things had left Quebec. And so the economy was kind of depressed, so the rents were extremely low. And so the apartment I described in Milton's apartment in Dirty Birds is almost a carbon copy of the one I moved into, sight unseen, from Craigslist when I moved there. The key difference was my little tiny room, had a window. Milton doesn't. But I paid like $150 rent with four strangers. And so that gives you the opportunity to work a crummy job part-time and then go out and pretend you're an artist the rest of the time, or go to parties and carry on like you're a famous poet and ladies man, even though you aren't. And so it was like the summer camp for all of these Anglophones from all across Canada, and a lot of people from especially the Toronto area would go there, not just for school, but after they would graduate. It was kind of a cheap place to be, that lived that bohemian lifestyle. And I went and lived that for a few months until I got sick of eating half-rotten fruit from the fruit stand and day-old bagels from the bagel stand and got a real job. And then it kind of turned into a much less romantic summer camp kind of place, and it was just another sort of city. And that's when I kind of fell out of love with Montreal a little bit, and then moved home to look after my mom, who was sick, a little bit there. So, yeah, it was this very strange world, and what that the sort of cheap living and crummy jobs allowed was that everybody was kind of living the same experiences, but everybody was pretending they were very serious artists, and their band was the band, and their poetry was very important, and so you had a lot of these kind of ridiculous characters all running around pretending they were grown-up artists when we were all really just kids still, even though we were in our 20s or 30s, or some of us were in our 40s. So it was a strange experience, to say the least.
And one of the people in the book, a filmmaker who took years and years to make a 7-minute film of seagulls at a dump in New Delhi. Why? Well, because it's seagulls at a dump in New Delhi. Why do you ask? So,
yes, exactly.
Is that based on a real person?
So that's Robin, and she becomes sort of the love interest in Milton's life. He becomes a little bit obsessed with her, and kind of a lot of the book is driven by his pursuit of trying to find her and win her heart. But yeah, her claim to fame, I guess you could call it that, is she drops out of Oxford and then moves to Calcutta to make this 7-minute long silent film, and it takes her 3 years.
Oh, right.
And it's this absurd thing, and I don't know, the film itself I made up, but I met a number of people who were like that, were making things that weren't that good, but they were very serious about them. And sort of the irony is that Robin is sort of one of the most sensible people in the book, and she has a lot of sort of insightful things to say to Milton throughout, but her career is this kind of phony baloney artistic filmmaking adventure. So That world was full of characters like that, up to all these different strange things. And the world does need artists, and it needs bad artists as well as good artists, because usually you got to make a lot of bad art before you start making good art. But there's a lot of pretense about it, and a lot of fodder for satire, for sure. So I took advantage of that.
That's right. Yes, it's Calcutta, not New Delhi, like I said. Morgan Murray is with us. We're talking about his book, Dirty Birds. Do you have something else in the works?
I did have some ideas of what I was going to work on next, but like you mentioned, the book was longlisted for Canada Reads, the CBC contest there at the start of the year of 2021, and so that's kind of thrown everything up in the air, because the book has really taken off since then, and it's gained a lot of popularity, and we sold out of the first print run of it, which was pretty rare. And so now I think I need to, I had been mulling over a nonfiction book idea in my head, but now I think I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out that next novel. And I have some ideas and about, it's going to be probably based in the prairies and probably more on the Alberta side of the border, but sort of that prairie experience of so many families is very similar. The homesteading and everything. And one character I'm particularly fascinated by is the poet Stephenson. I don't know if you've heard that name.
Can't say as I have. No.
He is, for my money, one of the greatest Canadian poets who ever lived, but very few people have ever heard of him. And he's from Iceland originally, and he homesteaded in central Alberta, not far from where I grew up. And he would work on the homestead all day, breaking his back farming. And I think he moved to Canada in the 1880s, and he passed away in the 1920s. And so he would work like a dog all day, and then he'd stay up all night writing poetry. But he wrote his poetry in Icelandic, so nobody in Canada has read it.
Oh, right.
But he's extremely famous in Iceland, and there's statues of him in Reykjavik and things. And it's kind of this strange but uniquely Canadian story where his poetry is very well respected by people who know it, and he's been compared to like Wordsworth and all of these giants of poetry. And he was writing about Canada and about this very important time in Canadian history, and he was a huge champion of sort of the settlement of the West, but he was also very involved in the pacifist movement and protests against the First World War and all these different things. And he was a big figure in the Lutheran Church until they kicked him out for his pacifism. So he's this really fascinating character who who lived not far from where I grew up, but nobody knows about him. And so I'd love to shine a light on him in some way, and so I'm trying to think of a way to craft a novel around his life and some other characters that I know about on the prairies, and kind of tell a more centralized story than with the Milton. He travels from Saskatchewan to Montreal to Newfoundland and back, so there's a lot of linguistic diversity in the book, which was a bit of a challenge. So maybe if I could stick to one place, we can get it done a little quicker. We'll see.
That's right, and we're talking with Morgan Murray. The book you should look for is Dirty Birds, published by Breakwater Books. How did you get in touch, or did they get in touch with you? How did that connection come about?
Yeah, Newfoundland is one of Canada's biggest small towns. So, like I said, I lived there for 9 years. First couple of years I was doing grad school, and then I worked at the local independent newspaper for a while. And if you stick around at universities long enough, they'll just give you a job, I found out. But St. John's is it's 100,000 people or more, but it's a very small town. And so just through my participation in different artistic things, I got to know a number of different writers and things. And I took a writing workshop with Lisa Moore, who's a fantastic author. She's won Canada Reads in the past, and she's been shortlisted for the Giller Prize and things, and she's a tremendous writer, and she was giving a workshop at the university, so I signed up, and learned a lot about writing fiction, and because I had written mostly journalism and nonfiction and stuff up to that point, and I always knew that I wanted to write a novel, but how do you write a novel? And so part of probably the best thing that came from that workshop was I met a number of other aspiring novelists, and so we continued to meet even after the class was over. And so the ones who are still in St. John's still meet every couple of weeks to tear each other to shreds and help each other's writing get better. And through that group, we all really grew. And I think there was 8 of us who started, and there's 5 left, I guess. But there's been 5 or 6 novels come out, and they've all done quite well, either in Atlantic Canada or right across the country. And it's been really exciting to be a part of that group. And one of the things that came out of that group was Breakwater Books, through their interest in Lisa Moore as kind of the godmother of Newfoundland writing, asked her if she would put together a collection of short stories of sort of new and upcoming writers in the province, and she said, sure. And then she came to our writing group and said, you're all in it. Send me a story. And so I had a story published in that anthology, and at the launch event for that, I was shoveling cheese in my face as fast as I could, because not every day you get free cheese. And the publisher came up, and or the editor for the publisher, he came up and asked me what I was working on. Eventually I told him, well, I have this idea for a novel about a hapless poet and his adventures in Montreal. And I think fortuitously for me, the editor, he was also a hapless poet who had some of the same adventures. So he fell in love with the idea before it was ever a novel, and he kind of hounded me for several years through a number of different life events and things until I finally relented and sat down and wrote the book. So it was a completely wrong way to find a publisher and go about doing that, but I'm glad that it worked out, and it's turned out pretty well so far. So we got there eventually.
That's right. Well, as they say, the universe works in mysterious ways. Morgan Murray is with us, a writer, and you make crooked furniture? What's that all about?
I don't mean to make it crooked, but it just ends up that way. I know woodworking is a hobby of mine, and so we moved house last fall, and our books are still all in a big pile in the basement because I need to build bookshelves yet, and the dining room table and all that stuff. And I won't let my wife buy anything because I insist on building it. And we inherited the property, a barn full of old lumber, so I'm itching to build it, and it'll be slightly imperfect, but it'll be furniture, maybe one day. We'll see.
We'll see. And just before we wrap things up here, I flipped open Dirty Birds again to a hockey card of Bitsy Fedorko from the Boise Noise. So, with the PCHL, Pacific Coast Hockey League, I'm assuming. Now, there's Bernie Fedorko. Who is Bitsy Fedorko? You just made him up, I'm sure.
Bitsy, as far as I know, is completely fictitious. There's a scene that the hockey card is in the scene where Milton, he's in college for 5 years, trying to figure out, he goes through instrumentation and electrical and welding and pipe fitting and carpentry and everything under the sun until he finally settles on the artistic sciences, which is a made-up diploma program that the college uses to defraud wayward students out of their money. But he goes, in the 5 years, he goes out for drinks with his classmates one night in his first year when he's in the instrumentation program. And everybody in the instrumentation program are failed junior hockey players. And so they're trading stories of their failure to become superstars. And the one guy's claim to fame is he played half a season in the defunct Pacific Coast Hockey League with the defunct Boise Noise, and Bitsy Fedorko, Bernie's nephew, was his defense partner for a short spell, and then he retired unwillingly. He was dishonored with his discharge from the hockey world and into the instrumentation world. So there's just a bit of fun kind of on the culture from back home and on the prairies of hockey is very central, and you see a lot of friends of mine play junior hockey at some level, and then after that they'd go on to figure out, oh, well, now what am I going to do in the oil patch?
Right.
Because that's kind of your options. And so I just wanted to kind of have a bit of fun with that, and I got to use the lingo of the hockey players, and then in footnotes add translation, so
right.
you can understand what the SJ means. The SJ is the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, compared to the AJ, which is the Alberta Junior Hockey League, and things like that.
Right, it's like snipe, shoot, celly, and give me some sauce and all that kind of stuff. So,
that's right. You need the dictionary and the translator to figure it out.
And Morgan Murray has been our guest. Dirty Birds is the book. I highly recommend everyone go out and track down a copy. I'm sure it's going to be available for a long, long time to come. And you said Newfoundland's slogan was "Come for the scenery, stay for the fog." Well, apparently Saskatchewan's is Saskatchewan, easy to draw, hard to pronounce, or hard to spell. One of the two. I can't figure it out. But anyway, whenever we meet people,
that's true.
Whenever we meet people from the States, they say, "Where are you from?" I say Saskatchewan, and they say Saskatchewan, and I say, "Yeah, just like Mississippi Pie." So you got to get back at them somehow, There's
that's right.
Okay, Morgan Murray, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.